what has happened to this tectonic change in the global alliances between, so to say, Europe and the America in the wake of this decision by the UK government.
It's not just Britain who's done it. It's been a coalition of countries.
First terrorist organization like Haganah and IGNU, right?
It's been very well documented by some Israeli historians. Many Jewish people who are friends of mine who are anti-Zionist or not Zionist, and who are highly critical of Israel.
Hello and very warm welcome to you. I am Sohail Qureshi from my show Sharp Edge from our London studios, and today I have Professor Gavin Evans with me to discuss a very important development in the global politics. UK and several Western countries, including European, recognizes the state of Palestine. Almost 70 odd years late, but at least finally and belated, the homecoming of very well awaited recognition. So without any further ado, let me go to Gavin and see what are the implications of this recognition of Palestine, especially at this important juncture of history and defying the, so to say, orders of Donald Trump. And we will also talk about the historical context of the state of Israel and Judaism and the Jewish people. Very warm welcome to you.
Nice to see you again, Sohail.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. You must have been watching this program very keenly that you and I are doing, and I hope that you find it very enjoyable.
I do. I think it's very well done. I've enjoyed it very much.
Yeah. So I wanted to speak to you. We had a brief discussion earlier on. What has happened to this tectonic change in the global alliances between, so to say, Europe and the America in the wake of this decision by the UK government, by Keir Starmer, about recognizing Palestine. What do you make of it?
Well, I think that it's not just Britain who's done it. It's been a coalition of countries. About 80% of the countries, I think, now of the United Nations General Assembly are recognizing Palestine, and I think it's a recognition of a state of desperation, where what is happening in Israel and Palestine is both the genocide in Gaza, and I think that is the correct term for it. There's been ethnic cleansing and just mass killing of civilians, starving of people, taking away water and food for long periods, at least 60,000 people killed, and it seems like most of them women, children, and other civilians. So there's that situation, but also the seizure of land in the West Bank, which they are starting to call Judea and Samaria, and seeing it as part, the kind of right-wing Zionists see it as part of the land going back to David. Of course, they talk about the United Kingdom of David and Solomon. It never existed. There was a kingdom of Judah, there was a kingdom of Israel, and there was never a united kingdom in that period. So it's a myth, but that seizure of land, I think, has been part of the reason people are seeing all over the world that the goal of a Palestinian state is going further and further. The two-state solution is becoming a chimera. And in many ways it is an act of desperation, and I think it's.
But why now? But before that, we just go back to the very mantra of the reason for the Jewish state of Israel, that the Jewish people lived there over 2,000 years ago. But in fact, the Jewish people headed by Abraham, who was an Iraqi, an Arab, who was reportedly born in Ur, which is one of the Chaldean state in Mesopotamia. And I wanted to ask you that is what the Genesis says. Genesis 12.1.3 and then so on and so forth. And why people are not talking about that? So because you have written your new book here, which I'm very thankful for the copy you gave me. So I want you to let's give the audience a historical context of this.
Okay, look, if you believe the Bible stories, if you believe the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, if you believe the Quran, if you believe the New Testament, then you think of those stories as being historical. But I don't. So I don't look at.
But that has been used.
Yeah,
as,
that has been. It's been. It's certainly been used. Yes.
Why Palestine? Why not Iraq, from where the Jewish people started off?
Because when you get any nation that emerges has its mythology, and that mythology comes from oral history, and then oral history gets turned around. Eventually, it gets written down. What gets written down gets changed and changed some more. I mean, Abraham was supposed to have lived nearly 4,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The last bits of Genesis were written. About 250 BCE. Mm-hmm. Then it's not history. It's these are mythological characters. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all the way to Moses and Joshua. There's no historical evidence that these people ever existed. There's no archaeological evidence. There's no archaeological evidence that Jews were enslaved in Egypt, or that Joshua kind of descended on what is now Israel, was then Israel and Judah, and seized the land, the promised land that had been promised by God to Abraham and then to Moses and finally delivered by Joshua. I mean, that's all mythological. But all societies have their myths. It's a bit like, in that sense, the Greek myths of the Odyssey and the Iliad. And if you look at the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible, I mean, it's full of dragons. It's of giants, of 900-year-old men. Joshua himself, God stopped the sun to help him, stop the sun going around the earth, because that's what they thought at the time. I mean, a talking donkey. Yeah. I mean, it's not real. Yeah. It's mythology, but those myths serve people because now there's been, particularly in Israel among the religious Zionists, a return towards a very literal view of the Hebrew Bible, of the Old Testament, because it serves people's interest.
But thank you very much for enlightening us. And yes, there is a mythological base for any ideology, any idea that humankind has. And maybe that became much more popular. But you pointed out that Jewish people, they needed to have an ideology for the reasons to come back. But why in 1948, or say, for example, 1897 onwards, why not 2,000 years ago? Because there is, according to Jewish eschatology, the Messiah has to come. But in 2,000 years, no Jewish population had a serious attempt of returning to Israel. Having said that, there were a lot of Jewish people who continue to live there.
Well, I think there were a number of reasons. I mean, there were pogroms against Jewish people, particularly in Russia, but in other parts of Europe. I mean, the Jewish side of my family came from Poland, where there were pogroms and persecution in the 1890s. They then moved to England to get away from that.
Russia, actually, so
1890s, and so many people, but not huge numbers, moved to what is now Israel in that time. Then in 1917, Britain, as part of the kind of bounty from the First World War, it becomes a British colony, essentially.
Mandate,
Britain has what's called the Balfour Declaration, in which it recognizes it as a future Jewish state. So Britain already
Sir Arthur
is steading.
Balfour, and the prime minister of that time.
Yeah,
very
that's right.
Christian Zionist at the time. Yeah.
It was an expression of Christian Zionism, which had emerged from about the 1830s, which was a kind of an idea that marrying various verses from the Old and New Testament, that the second coming of Jesus the Jews needed to come back to Israel, that the all sorts of historical events had to happen, but that was the key one. And so getting the Jews back to Israel was kind of helping the return of Jesus in that view. And it was that momentum, in a way, which led to the or part of what led to the Balfour Declaration. So after 1917, there's the very slow trickle starts to speed up. But I mean, when we get to 1948 and you have the Holocaust, and so many Jews were homeless and they had nowhere to go. America didn't want too many of them. Britain didn't want too many. So they came to what is now Israel. Nevertheless, in 1947, the population of what was then Palestine, would now be Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank, was 2/3 Palestinian.
Arabs and 1/3,
Yeah, and
right.
I don't think that all would have called themselves Arabs, but 2/3 Palestinian, and one-third Jewish, and the land was owned similarly, 2/3, 1/3. So what happens is then the new body, the United Nations, decides that it needs to be divided, but the division that was offered was 52% for the Jewish population, who were a third of who were really 33%. So the land, and 48% of the land going to the Palestinian population. So obviously that was not accepted, and that led to the war that prompted the Nakba, where.
No, but before that, just shortly before that, in 40s,
Yeah.
the first terrorist organization like Haganah in Ignore, right?
Yeah. So there was there were two terror groups, and
the Jewish terrorist group.
Yeah, Jewish terrorist group
against the Arabs,
against the Brits
and the British.
Yeah, against the Arabs and
because that is
the British.
documented in the British history.
Yeah. It's been very well documented by some Israeli historians, and they've documented the massacres that took place.
Especially David Ben Gurion.
Yeah, well, David Ben, but one of the massacres in 1948, which was committed by the Stern Gang and Irgun. They both were involved. I think there were something like 112 mainly civilians murdered. Some of the women were raped and prisoners were shot. So,
considering the population was much more scant, probably
much more scant,
of the
but
population now, yeah.
So these massacres were taking place, and that created terror within the population. Also, then when the war started in 1948 under David Ben Gurion, people were just physically moved. So there was a kind of an ethnic cleansing.
But don't you think this was the failure, or maybe a calculated ploy, of the British Empire to leave two of the most challenging geographic areas in the world, Kashmir in India, between India and Pakistan, kind of undivided and left in a lurch, and also Palestine. Why not to accept the state of Palestine there and then on 14th of May 1948, which was the day of Israel's Independence Day, and then have two people live peacefully side by side, even though it may not have been that just, but considering that majority of the world or Muslim world was under the colonial powers, so it wouldn't have been that big an issue as it is now.
Well, I think they should have done the same in India and Pakistan. But just to stick to there, I think that the solution then, and maybe in the long term, now that the two-state solution is, I don't know if it's viable anymore, would be a secular and democratic state in which, if you've got a right to return, it should be both communities having it or none. I think that could have happened in 1948, but instead they allowed a different approach.
So much of water has gone under the bridge, as they say. Now, coming back to the current scenario in the aftermath of this genocide and so much of basically cacophony of genocide everywhere in the world. Now, do you think it is possible for both Israelis and Palestinians to live whether under two-state solution or under one state?
Well, okay, so I grew up mainly in apartheid South Africa. In apartheid South Africa between 1990 and 1994, something like 18,000 people were killed in political violence. And then one had a history of colonialism by the Dutch and British, in which people were enslaved for 200 years. And then you had another history of the most brutal form of oppression, which was a dehumanizing form of oppression, which was apartheid. And yet, there was an election. The ANC won that election. There hasn't been much political violence. There's been criminal violence, but that's a different kind of thing. There've been all sorts of problems, but black and white people, by and large, get on okay. And I think that over time, it's not impossible that something like that could happen in Palestine and Israel.
Yeah, but I think that there were many factors. There were unifying African giant, I will say, Nelson Mandela, with his Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And I think that was a masterstroke to bring two vying nations to be together. And secondly, the population of the white or Afrikaans, it was very small comparing to the overall population, as opposed to what it is Israel and Palestine. And if you put everything together, they are pretty much more or less 50-50.
About 50-50, yeah.
So
I mean, if you took all of the West Bank, all of Gaza, and allowed some of the exiles to return, it would be roughly 50-50.
Yeah. And both people, both Jewish and Palestinian, they're wonderful people. I mean, they have done wonders. Jewish people resisted over 100 exiles and exoduses since from the Roman time to the last one and the worst Holocaust in the history. Palestinian resisted so much in last 70, 80 years. Wherever they are, wherever their diaspora is, they are doing wonderful jobs with the Israel's democratic norms, with its scientific advantages. I think if they live together peacefully, they can create a heaven there for everyone.
I think a heaven might be overstating it, because there would be a lot of problems. But the
hearts can change, that's what I mean.
I'm not sure that there's a different long-term solution. I don't know if partitioning it really can work anymore. I mean, nearly 50% of the West Bank is controlled by Israel. So how can you remove 700,000 people from the West Bank to make a Palestinian state, or the biggest part of the Palestinian state? It doesn't seem feasible.
Going back to 1967 border, the Green Line.
Going back to the 67. So I think,
1948 mandated.
Yeah. So I think there are probably no solutions for a long time, and there's going to be terrible
We
things
need
happening.
to be a bit hopeful.
I would like to be.
Yeah.
I would like to be hopeful. When I look at other places which are divided, I mean, Ireland and Northern Ireland. I think that in another generation there'll be one country which will be called Ireland, but because of the particular history, because not just Zionists but Christian Zionists have so much invested in the idea of a state for the Jewish people, that it makes it more difficult.
What happened? America, obviously, as the world order suggests, America and Europe, or the Western European powers, the rich, I'd say 3W, white, wealthy, and Western. So these powers, especially spearheaded by England and France and Germany, they are dictating the term for the entire Europe. They have been inalienable to this idea of supporting Israel. And now coming to recognizing Palestine in 2025, September, right in the middle of the war or genocide, what do you see behind the scenes?
As I said, I think that there's a realization that any possibility of a two-state solution, which is their only answer that they have, is disappearing before their eyes as more and more land in the West Bank is seized, and so they felt they had to kind of intervene in a big way to show that this was still on the cards. Whether it is really on the cards is a different story, but I think it's a good move. I mean, I don't have any faith in the idea of a two-state solution, and I also think that given the history, the place of the Palestinian people is not just in the West Bank and Gaza; it's in the whole of Israel. And they've been there for thousands of years, just like the Jews can trace their history back thousands of years. They all came,
Philistines and
the Philistines, and
Canaanites
they all came from what were broadly and loosely called the Canaanites, which were a number of different kind of tribes and
around
people.
Mesopotamia and
and
Chaldeans and Hittites.
And there is also a view, I mean, it was argued in his book by an Israeli author called Shlomo Sand that the Palestinians are, at least in part, descendants of the Jewish population that didn't go into exile in the first and second centuries, and were converted to Islam.
Yeah, well, they were, but it is all well documented in the Jewish history. That Isaac had two sons.
No, but I'm not talking about Isaac. I'm talking about in the 7th century when Saladin and when they took over that area.
1187, you mean?
Yeah,
1187 when Saladin
and before then. That people were converted. So you know, a new conqueror comes in. A new religion comes in order to survive or in order to prosper. You convert to the and I think many people. The argument is that many people did convert. So that the Palestinians themselves are, at least in part, descendants of the original Jewish population.
But what happens now with the Christian Zionists and Zionists? Because it looks like quite a big, heavy defeat at the world theater. Because recognizing it may sound very important right now, but the fact is this: that it will lead the way of many other things that I will tabulate in a minute. What do you think?
I think it might. I think that. In the reality of it is that only the United States has any sway over Israel, and for all sorts of reasons, they're not prepared to use that. And so the impact of Britain, France, and Canada and other countries recognizing a Palestinian state is limited. It's not non-existent. I do think it's the right move, but I don't think we should overstate its significance.
Well, it all starts with an idea. it starts with an idea and then it just grows. It just becomes a fully formed. So in about 2 to 3 months ago, you cannot wave a Palestinian flag in London or in this country. We have videos of lots of people who are just putting a Palestinian flag on their houses or in the streets, waving it around, and then they were caught by the police. So what happens now? Do you think it will be allowed now?
I mean, the legal basis of that is very dubious. What it is that there was a group called Palestinian Action, and they were engaged in what were considered terrorist actions. Now, the terrorist actions that they were engaged in was spray painting airplanes and things like that. So they weren't killing people, they weren't injuring people. It was agitprop theater, really. So they became a prescribed organization, a banned organization. So that then the logic of arresting people is because they were campaigning, it was said, for the unbanning
forceful action.
Forceful action for Palestinian action. So they were saying, well, you're supporting a terrorist organization, then we can arrest you. I mean, it's a legal nonsense. Yeah. And we'll see what happens with the court cases. But I think that it was the wrong decision to take that action against Palestinian action. I mean, sure, if somebody spray painting airplanes, charge them, but don't go and ban an organization that is not violent. The second thing is charging people for supporting an organization. I mean, that to me just sounds like going against free speech.
Yeah. Interestingly, last evening I was a book ceremony by Reuters and Thompson in near King's Cross, and I met a very young, dynamic, white British lady who is from Palestinian Action, and I had a good parley with her on this topic, and she was super excited what decision made. And it appeared that the Palestinian Action is coming up in another name, and then we will see a furore of activities for the pro-Palestine. And I think once that thing is unleashed, it will be difficult for the UK government not to engage in many other actions to support Palestine, or probably do some more actions against Israel. Do you think something like that happening?
I think it's quite possible that Britain will put Britain under Keir Starmer treads very, very carefully on Israel, but I think they got to the point where both internationally and in terms of their own base, they really had no option but to take a stand. I mean, of course, they've continued to sell arms to Israel, and some of those arms have been used in Gaza. So for many people who might once have supported the Labour Party won't anymore, because they say you've got Palestinian blood on your hands. So I think part of it is a reaction to that sentiment. But I think part of what they did was also because the international situation they're seeing is so dire, and it wasn't Britain alone. It was a united action by several countries.
Yeah. Because Europe has been spearheading the egalitarian values, human rights all over the world. And this was actually a dark phase in the European history, basically, especially as a champions of human rights, with so much of a massacre going on, and not to do the right thing, which is to stop the genocide. But interestingly, is this at this moment, while things are still very hot, Donald Trump is more than ever is anti-Palestinian, anti-Islam. He has said it many times, and apparently has made remarks which are more akin to warnings to the countries who will recognize Palestine. So how do you see politically, how it's going to work? Is it a new world order coming? America is loosening its grip on its allies?
Well, I think the United States is retreating, would be the generous way of putting it, but is losing its influence on world events. I mean, economically, in many ways, it's being outpaced by China. And politically, it's lost its influence largely because of Trump's behavior in all sorts of ways, whether it's tariffs, whether it's the kind of random way he's acted on Ukraine, going one way and then the next way, depending on who's he's spoken to most recently. So I think there is a decline in American influence. But I would be pretty surprised on this issue whether Starmer and others hadn't, through back channels, cleared it with America, and the administration there would have said, all right, look, we're not going to go that direction, but if you do, we won't. We'll just say we disagree with you.
But Gavin, it still is an enigma that why not another 6 months or 1 year? Nobody was pushing UK and France, and I think there's much more than meets the eye here. Because nobody was pushing to recognize Palestine.
Oh, I think the pressure was.
Yeah.
I think the pressure because of what was happening in Gaza and the West Bank was immense, and I think those countries were seeing that any chance of a two-state solution was evaporating, and so that they had to act now. I mean, the seizures of land in the West Bank by settlers has been alarming.
It's horrendous, horrendous. Now, what do you think the next step will be? So this recognition has happened. The Palestinian embassy has been unveiled, which is a good sign. A massacre or ongoing massacre is still there. But do you think it can first of all of the countries who have recognized Palestine, it will coalesce them to put a sanction against Israel, or maybe a military intervention within them, or with the help of United Nations?
Well, there certainly won't be a military intervention there. I think we can be pretty sure of that. The United Nations, with American veto, there's very little that they can do. So, yeah, these countries might have sanctions that go beyond the very limited sanctions on some arms that exist at the moment. But I think Britain will continue to step very, very cautiously on this issue, leaving things until the pressure is so much that they feel they can't do otherwise. I mean, that certainly has been the pattern with Keir Starmer in the past.
Mahmoud Abbas, who's the president of Palestinian government, has indicated that Hamas is ready to step down. Then there is a parallel alliance between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. You might have heard strategic military defense agreement. It may still be an eyewash, but that is quite a big move. That attack on one country will be attack on another, with Saudi Arabia almost getting a nuclear power status, with the Pakistani army and military going there, roughly about 12 minutes away from Israel. And that is a very significant move. And I don't believe that even that happened without the supreme authority of America, because both of these countries are under heavy influence by America's, aka America and Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. And then now this thing is coming up. There is much more than meets the eye. I'm sorry, I'm repeating this phrase.
Though there might well be. I mean, and on the other side, there's the Qatar initiative, which is a peace plan that does, in Gaza at least, which does seem to be viable. I mean, it might be that with more pushing and prodding and more international movement, America comes to support that peace plan. But they're a long way from that at the moment.
Well, what is really surprising, with all of these kind of global events happening, it may be a kind of a little bit of lusterless, or it may not have those claws at the minute, both of these events I just mentioned. But undoubtedly, it can assume a domino effect, which can make the existence of Israel or trouble for Israel even go worse than this. But why the Israeli government and America are not coming down on this escalation ladder to come up with the stopping of the war or come up with some kind of a solution that is acceptable to all parties?
Yeah, it's also part of that with the Trump administration is that you've got a base which has a very strong element of Christian fundamentalism in it, and that includes the Christian Zionist perspective that that Israel needs to be, both sides of the Jordan need to be part of Israel. In some versions, that Solomon's temple, of which there is no evidence ever existed, needs to be rebuilt, etc., etc., for the second coming to happen. So Trump has that as part of his base, and he's always turning to his base. So I think for Trump to move towards a situation, say, accepting the Qatar peace plan, would be it would be challenging to put it mildly for his base. So I think it's difficult for them to move more than they've moved, and Trump's own view is all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, Trump is, I tell you, he's a gone case now. It's a matter of another few months. And the actual deterioration in his neuropsycho architecture will reveal to the world what he's going through. But some argue that there is a Jewish eschatology, a Jewish thought process, that until the entire world is against Jewish people, the second Messiah will not return. Probably an idea which has been brought by the Christian Zionists, especially the Bible Belt in America, which you say is the main base of Donald Trump. So is there any purposeful effort by Israeli or the hardcore Israelis to make everybody in the world go against them?
No, I don't. I think. I mean, if some people believe that, it's certainly not a majority opinion. In fact, Messianic Judaism is very much a minority view within Judaism now. I mean, it was certainly a big thing in the kind of first and second century where everybody was thinking about this kind of Jesus character emerging, and sure enough, he did emerge. I have some doubts actually whether Jesus was really an historical character, but that's a different.
Herodotus mentioned him just with a few lines.
Yeah, well, not Herodotus. There are a couple of people, but they're all writing 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years after him, and they're getting the information from Christians. So there's no contemporary evidence of other than the Bible of Jesus at all. But anyway, maybe he existed. But there was this kind of messianic idea within Judaism at that time. But since the sacking of the temple in 70 CE, a rabbinical form of Judaism emerged. And within that, the kind of messianic idea has not been the kind of predominant idea. There are groups of Orthodox Jews who believe that. There was a rabbi called Rabbi Schneerson, who some people thought was the Messiah within those groups, but it's not the concern of most Orthodox, and certainly not most Reform or Progressive Jews in the world. So I don't think it's a major view within Judaism today.
You have really poured down and distilled all your research and wisdom in this lovely book called Bible Stories, which I got an advance copy, and I'm gleefully happy, and thank you very much for making it personal writing here, which I'm sure will have all of this facts and fiction, as it says, fact, fiction, and fantasy in Scripture. So, and the talking donkeys. So I'm not going to challenge you on the veracity of what you're saying.
No, I'm
about
sure.
this. But definitely
I'm
we
sure a
will
lot of
leave it,
people will, though.
yeah. We will leave it on another day. One final note on UK's decision. Keir Starmer has publicly announced that he is from a Jewish family. He has ancestors who are Zionists living in Israel. His wife, I think, is a practicing Jewish. And then at this nadir moments of his political career, where on one hand we have Nigel Farage, then Tommy Robinson, Donald Trump, and of course Elon Musk. Don't you think that this decision of Keir Starmer at this juncture of recognizing Palestine will actually hit him or shooting in the foot kind of action?
No, I didn't think so. I mean, I know many Jewish people who are friends of mine who are anti-Zionist or not Zionist, and who are highly critical of Israel. And some of them are practicing Jews, and they believe that there should be a secular and democratic country in that area rather than
As a one country.
yeah, rather than a Jewish or Palestinian state. And there are many people like that. So I don't think that there's any contradiction for somebody to be highly critical of Israel, somebody who doesn't believe in ethnic states, of which Israel is one, and who accepts the rights of the Palestinians and who is Jewish. I don't see any contradiction there. I mean, as I say, my own father was Jewish, so but it doesn't mean I'm a Zionist.
You're a human being first before you
become
any other caste, color, and creed. And what is important is that all human beings are basically born innocent, and they have the reasons to be together and with a peace and harmony, except some of the politicians, not all. They really for their own means, and that's what I call global psychopathy. Right. So just one last comment from you. Do you think with this decision of recognizing Palestine by important Western countries, there is a glimmer of hope that there will be some form of peace for both Israelis and Palestinians?
I think that if there is to be something closer to peace, it will require an election in which Netanyahu gets defeated in Israel. His existence as not just as prime minister, but as someone who's out of jail, depends on him staying in power. And to stay in power, he has to satisfy people even further to the right than him. So it might take an election there for him, and his defeat in an election, which is not by any means certain, before those kind of good things happen. But I think it is a step in the right direction.
Excellent. Thank you very, very much. So, dear audience, you heard from Professor Gavin Evans, who is an author of many great books, especially this new one, Bible Stories, that I would advise everybody to buy on Amazon and to read through. We have covered quite a large area of discussion, from history to the politics and what's going to happen. Both Israelis and Palestinian people there, they have very much inalienable right to live peacefully with happiness and joy, with the pursuit of happiness in that area. There's no reason that they cannot live together. And that is actually a plea and a hope and a dream that these both nations can work it out in one way or another and make the entire world a peaceful place. With that, I say thank you very, very much to all of you for watching this program. Please don't forget subscribing this channel and click on the bell so that you can get our new videos. And especially don't forget to put your comments. Whatever comments you are, we will take it. Until my next program, is goodbye from me, Sohail Qureshi, on Qs.News. Bye.